Welcome back to Veterans Forum, a program by veterans, about veterans, for veterans and their families. I'm your co-host, Bob West, with Ray Chattery and Jerry Devlin. Our goal is to provide you with important information about legislation, benefits, support, and activities important to you and your family by interviewing leaders in our community. Jerry, who do we have with us today?
We're very fortunate to have this edition of Veterans Forum, to have a man who's a personal friend of all of us, but especially a friend to all of Maryland's veterans. George Owings has had a very distinguished career, and again, his career is attributed to the nonpartisanship of two governors, Bob Ehrlich and Larry Hogan. George was a former delegate from Calvert County, and he rose to be number 3 Democrat in the House of Delegates, and he is a combat Marine and lots of good things like that, and that Bob Ehrlich put partisanship aside and appointed him as Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and then he served briefly under Governor O'Malley, and then present Governor Larry Hogan appointed him again, and again he heads what is really probably the best Department of Veterans Affairs in the United States. People come from long distances to look at our Charlotte Hall, the Veterans Home, and the Veterans Cemetery program, which are the height of veterans concern that any state has shown. So we really are lucky to have George Owings III, and actually comes from Owings, Maryland, which is, they had a hard time picking out the name.
Welcome back, Secretary Owings. We might as well get started on the latest initiatives, especially from the governor, who has been talking about extending the tax exemption for retirement of military retirement pay. And how is that coming right now?
Well, Bob, let me first thank Jerry for that over-the-top introduction. I greatly appreciate that. I'm very proud to be here tonight to represent Governor Hogan and the administration, as well as the Department of Veterans Affairs. Recently, Governor Hogan did, as he has done all 3 years he's been in, promote the full exemption on the military retirement income for those that have dedicated a good portion of their lives to service of our country. And once again this year, he has introduced himself a bill that will exempt all of the military retirement income. There is a time limitation or an age restriction on this year's bill, but nonetheless, it still would grant full exemption if the bill were to pass successfully.
Do we have any feeling at this time as to what the success is going to be? Because it always seems to have a problem coming out of the House.
Well, the numbers that are offered up by different forces, you can figure out what that means yourself. The numbers that always come out paint a dark picture on one side, but a bright picture on the other side. Very, very quickly, let me just say that a retired veteran has no children in school. The husband and or the wife, whichever is a veteran, is probably doing a second career, earning income, generating more money. They have a house, they have real estate taxes, they are generating more income into the neighborhood where they shop for food, clothing, what have you. The expendable income, or the discretionary income, is higher than most other people that are working their first primary job, who are raising a family. So it makes no sense for these people to have to leave the state and go elsewhere just to save on their income tax for their retirement income. In fact, I have a cousin, whose name is not necessary to reveal at this time, retired military, moved across the border to Pennsylvania, but still has a job down here. He pays no Maryland tax. And it bothers him, but that's the way it is right now.
Mm-hmm. We know that there's a Veterans Trust Fund that we currently have in the state, and how well is that doing?
The Veterans Trust Fund could not be doing better. It is operated by one individual who is the administrator, Mark Hendricks by name, and in fact I would invite you all to invite him to this program in the near future so he can go into detail on how effective it's been. The trust fund was formed in 2009, and it was codified in 2013. So far, we've put out about $160,000 to who? To veterans and to the veterans' families who are on hard times. It is a grant a one-time grant, and it would cover just about any and every need that arises in a family that has fallen on hard times. So when I say about everything, we pay electric, we pay fuel, we pay food, we pay child care, we pay car repair, we pay rent payments, we pay mortgage payments. We will pay just about any and everything that any family is struggling to meet, but only on a one-time basis to help them get back on their feet. Right now we've got about $160,000 in the trust fund, and we put out well over $100,000 in the last few years.
And how would a veteran get in contact with your office about this benefit?
That is a question, if you hadn't asked it, I was hoping I could bait somebody to ask me. Anybody that doesn't go to veterans.maryland.gov at least once a week is missing a great deal of information, all tailored to the veteran and the veteran family across this state. It's been up and operating now for several years. Denise Noe, formerly as a field representative with Senator Barbara Mikulski, is the deputy secretary of that program, and she does a tremendous job on getting that out. Even on vacation, that newsletter pops up every 2 weeks. It's just chock full of information, but it also takes you into our website where you find things like the trust fund. All other issues veteran-related are found at veterans.maryland.gov.
Well, I can say that I receive a lot of email responses from your office on a very frequent basis on what's happening for veterans, job fairs, and all sorts of things. And if you're not currently signed up with the Department of Veterans Affairs to get these emails, you should do it as soon as possible, because it's chock full of important information for you and your family. I know Ray was involved with the original Charlotte Hall a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, or whenever that was. And there's some thought of having a second veterans home.
For the first time in history, we have a very short, albeit still a list of veterans waiting to get into Charlotte Hall. I think we have a list now of about 4. It's never happened before in the history of the home. The home has been in business now for 33 years, operated with 5 state employees and a contractor that we hire. In fact, we just let the latest contract a couple of months ago. Sharon Murphy is the director there, and she's been there 33 years. So she's been there a year longer than it's been the home. She was there the last year it was a school, as a matter of fact. The staff there does a tremendous job of operating that. We are in the process of expanding, hopefully somewhere in the north part of the state or out in the west. We don't know where yet exactly, because there's certain numbers that have to be crunched and be met. But where the need is where we hope to relocate a second home. That was one of my desires the last time I was in this position, and it certainly hasn't gone away during the time I was gone. We need a second home, and I'm hoping that at least on this term around, we can at least lay the groundwork to have that second home at least on the map.
And I understand there's been some expansion of some of the medical services available at Charlotte Hall that they've added in the recent year or two. I think it was eye care or something of that nature that they were having.
Well, we have a full complement of doctors there, and in fact, for those of your viewers that do not know it, we have a CBOC located on the premises. Now they're in the process of relocating that CBOC to another place in southern Maryland in St. Mary's County. But right now, in fact, that's where I go for my care. Currently is the CBOC on the grounds of Charlotte Hall. But it's a full measured, as far as the home itself goes. We do dental care, eye care, you get a haircut. I mean, just about anything you need. It's self-contained, and it is, as Jerry said, it is a model. We are most proud of Sharon this year, for she is the national president of the veterans' homes across the country. So she occupies that position of president right now. So we're very proud of her, and that just shows you the kind of attention that Charlotte Hall gets.
The other thing too is, and Jerry was involved with this, was veterans courts, and we've been able to have it here in Prince George's County and in Baltimore too, Jerry?
Yeah.
Is there any other counties that have it right
There's
now?
talk about it. I'm not sure there are any others.
There was another one in Frederick County. Up there was Judge Raleigh, and he was conducting a court there for a while. I don't know. I think that's on hold right now. But the two courts are Judge Weinstein out of Baltimore, East Baltimore, and here in Prince George's County, as you know.
Is that going to expand throughout the state?
I would like to think it would. It's very effective. It's proved to be effective, the way that it's operated and managed and what it does. Quite honestly, it gives someone who has had a bad trip somewhere, fallen perhaps, and need to get back on their feet without a blemish. It's going to ruin them for the rest of their life. It downgrades accordingly whatever the issue was with them, gives them a second breath, and they can get on their feet and start walking again in the right lane.
Is that something that the judiciary has to take up, Jerry?
Yes. What happened, the governor's commission on it let the decision be made by the judiciary, and we've been very lucky, luckier than anywhere, really. Judge Sheila Tillison Adams is the administrative judge for the circuit court in Upper Marlboro, and she's been a champion right from the beginning.
Well, you know, that's important too, to make sure that that benefit is available, because it's been available in a couple of states, but
Well,
that
it started
really should
in
be
Buffalo,
something,
New York, and it's,
nationally. As far as the outreach is concerned, I like the idea of the various workshops and job fairs that keep coming up on your website, especially those associated. I see them for Fort Meade, especially, and those things are pretty important to veterans that are just coming out of the service and are looking for a job. And if you don't have a job, it's pretty much your own fault. You need to knock on some doors, and I'm sure they'll be open to you. You had mentioned something as we were talking before the show about state parks and the veterans' benefit about getting into state parks.
Yes. Additionally, another benefit for all of our veterans in the state, Governor Hogan has authorized the Secretary of Department of Natural Resources, retired, actually he's a retired Rear Admiral, Mark Belton, to open up the parks 365 to all veterans free of charge. Now, when I say free of charge, there are some parks that might have amenities or things that you would use other than just a visit to the beach, like at Calvert Cliffs or something of that nature, where there may be a fee for other members of your party. That's not the case in all of them. Most of the parks you'll find that the whole carload goes through free of charge. But for the veteran, all 72 parks in the state, I believe that's the right number, are free of charge 365 days a year for the veteran.
See, and that's another important point, because all veterans can have veteran on their driver's license. Yes. And so here's another reason why when you get
George, isn't that free now?
That's free. When it started,
it was $40.
It was well, it was actually $20 if you were not in your renewal cycle. Secretary Ron, through Chrissy Nizer, who is the administrator for the Maryland for the Motor Vehicle Administration, saw fit to just say, look, a veteran is a veteran regardless of when they renew. Let's allow it for all veterans to change it whenever they walk in free of charge, and that is now the case.
Well, and also they passed legislation that businesses and everybody else, they have to accept the legality of your veteran status if you have it on your license. Right. There's a number of businesses, that give 5 and 10% discounts to veterans, and so in other words, your driver's license becomes an identification that they have to accept.
We talked a little bit about veteran cemeteries, and we have a few in the state, and you were saying that there was going to be some expansion of the cemeteries?
For the first time in the history of the program, there are expansions. In fact, 3 of them have already been approved, but there's expansion going on in all 5 of our cemeteries. Just as a point of interest, and we're acknowledged actually nationally when this comes up, we bury more veterans in our state cemeteries than any other state or territory in the nation and outside of the nation. Well, how can that be? You're not as large as Texas or Florida or California or New York. No, we're not. but we have more state-owned cemeteries than any other state. Where do they bury theirs? They bury them in national cemeteries, much the same as Arlington or any other national cemetery. Maryland has Baltimore Cemetery, but that's all but closed. And so we look very, very seriously at where we are, where we need to expand, and it just so happens that now all of the cemeteries are undergoing expansions. 3 have been approved and 2 are waiting to be approved. That will carry us out well beyond our current numbers.
It's nice to know as a veteran that our Department of Veterans Affairs will be the last people to let us down.
Actually, the numbers now, the numbers are bantered around as to how many are here now. We got the revised numbers recently from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Maryland now has about 399,600 veterans. That number came down from 437,000 overnight almost. I don't know where the count came from, but that's our latest count. By the year 2020, they're expecting Maryland to house or to be home to about 325,000 veterans.
And if you go to the Veterans Cemetery at Cheltenham, it's a little local note that the services in the chapel are part of the ceremony, and the chapel is named for the late Senator Edward T. Conroy of Bowie, who was a champion of, and himself a disabled American veteran, national commander of the disabled American veteran.
And you can make a reservation at the cemetery of your choice. Yeah. You don't have to give them a due date, but
well,
you can make a reservation.
People are dying to get in.
No, Bob, you're right. We take that very seriously, and the restrictions are somewhat onerous on some people. But if you've been here all your life, or if you left service here or you got in service here, and this was your home of record, there's no problem. If you move out, you need to let us know that you're coming back ahead of time. We'd like to have about 2 years of residency because they are filling up, as Jerry said.
Yeah. And to protect your rights in that, it's always a good practice when you have a will to file a copy with the Register of Wills, which prevents fires and so forth. And in that copy, you should have your DD 214 and the application that's sent to the Department of Veterans Affairs reserving you a space. So this prevents a lot of problems for when someone dies and, where's the will and what's in it, and that should be in a DD 214 and the site of the.
Now we've been told that Prince George's County Register of Wills will register your DD 214, and it's exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. You have to be a family member or to be able to get that. Do the other counties, do they have this same?
I don't know the answer to that, Ray, quite honestly. When I got out, Mother was the assignment secretary for the 7th Circuit at the time, back in the 60s when I got out. She worked for then Judge Perry G. Bowen. Jerry, I'm sure you recognize that name.
Sure.
So she worked for him. He had me actually go to the courthouse while I was at the courthouse, that's where he is and she was, to actually register mine. And I went down and registered it myself. So it is a public record on my part.
Right.
As far as, is there a problem? Once in a while, once in a great while, we will run into a situation where we cannot find the document needed on the day that it's needed. But we go to extraordinary lengths, and I mean that sincerely, and those that have been in that position that are in the listening audience know how far we go to make sure that it goes on as scheduled, and we have been pretty successful to do that about 99% of the time.
Yeah, you can have most court houses will register your DD 214. As a former resident of Pennsylvania, I did that immediately upon discharge and took it over to the courthouse, and they made a copy of it. Although it's getting a lot easier to go online and contact the various personnel offices of the military branches to get a copy of the DD 214.
Let me just say, it is the most important document that a veteran can have.
Right.
They get out, we get our 214, we put it away somewhere, and we don't ever expect to see it again. The family needs to see it again at some point in time
Right.
if you're going to go into one of the state-owned cemeteries. But more than that, if there is a need for the remaining surviving spouse or dependent children, and they can be elderly children who have been dependent throughout their lives for obvious reasons, you need that document. So I cannot ever impress enough upon our listeners who are veterans and or their families to find a copy of it, put it where you know you can get your hands on it, and safeguard it.
Now, of course, before you get to the veteran cemetery, you go to a funeral parlor.
Yes.
Well, the funeral parlor can't do anything without that DD 214. They can't get a flag or anything. And then, of course, you know, the problem with getting it to either Cheltenham or Crownsville here in this area, it's, I mean, because I know our quartermaster, Paul Conley, whenever you join the VFW, you have to, he keeps a copy on file. And several widows we have really bailed out because we were able to.
Put your hands on it, yes.
He was able to provide them with a copy of the DD 214 and for them to go to the funeral parlor in order to get this done.
Most important document.
Yes.
And we heard recently that Montgomery County said that they have an aggressive program on veterans homelessness, and we were wondering how the veterans homelessness, is handled throughout the state.
The problem is further exacerbated today by a memo I got from the VA, and hadn't even been put out yet as far as to the organizations in the state because it just came across my desk today. Homelessness is now tied to something even worse than just being on the street for a while. They're finding that evictions in the previously homeless community, now in housing through the HUD-VASH vouchers or whatever the means are being evicted at a higher rate than ever before. And HUD is backing away from further assistance because the voucher's already in place. And the question is, well, what have you been doing? You were fine, we qualified you, you were in, something's gone wrong. The homelessness situation is now worse based on the eviction numbers. And worse than that, we're finding that the suicide rate again is on the increase because of the evictions. So it's a nightmare right now that I'm learning about just today. I'm hoping we can get a handle on it. We belong to the Governor's Council on Homelessness, which deals not just with veterans, of course, but with the homeless situation statewide. We have a seat at that table. We certainly follow what's going on at the federal level and their attempt to rein it in, but that PIT number that comes out, that's the point in time number that comes out once a year. It's supposed to reflect the coldest day of the year and who's out there on the streets at this point in time. We rely on those numbers to a degree, but those are so far reaching, you never know. Are you getting everybody? Are you seeing those that are out, or are they missing people that are couch surfing? Are you missing people living in their car? Are you missing people that are out of town now and in Pennsylvania with grandma? Who are you missing, and who is really homeless and who is not? It's a chronic situation, it truly is.
I think it really gets back to the mental illness issues that for PTSD and so forth that so many veterans are suffering from, and this is a result of some of that.
It's further troubling, and I mean seriously troubling, when you think that you think of the veteran, you think of a guy. I mean, that's just the way this crowd, the four of us, we think of guys. That's no longer the case. We have female veterans in large numbers that have children that are also homeless in this state and in this nation. And you just can't ever in your own mind explain how, but more than that, why. And so the outreach programs that are out there, well-meaning, well-funded in a lot of cases, but we're not getting everybody, and we never will.
Now, are any of these homeless, are they eligible to go to Charlotte Hall?
Sure, if they're veterans. Certainly. without any restriction on pay. As you know, Ray, we have people in Charlotte Hall that can carry the full freight. We have others that don't have a dime. They're treated the same.
Right.
There's no maximum payment, George?
Yes, it is capped, Jerry. It's capped. I think it's about $3,100 a month. It's similar to what you'll find in a nursing home because that's what Charlotte Hall is basically. It just happens to be for veterans and/or their eligible spouses only.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is it has to do with veterans taking the first step of letting people know that there's an issue and they need some assistance. We have service officers that are available every Monday on at our DAV on Monday nights and from 7 to 9, and you don't need an appointment. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. But again, they have to show up in order for us to tell them about the services that they have.
It's interesting to me, and again, I will close with veterans.maryland.gov. It is a resource that is invaluable to a veteran that doesn't even know. We did, in fact, it was a friend of mine that I worked with many years ago in the bank, never knew he was a veteran, much less landed on Normandy. 95 years old, passed away this year. His wife's in her late 80s. He came to me and he said, George, you know, I've never come to you. He was a coastie. He had a Purple Heart because he was transporting to Normandy, to the beach, to Omaha, back and forth that day. A coastie. I wasn't aware that they did, but there were some there. He was one. Got his Purple Heart. Never talked about it. All the years we worked together at the bank, and all of us that knew him never knew it. Well, he came to me last year, and he had a furnace that had gone out, and his wife's in her late 80s. And he says, is there any help I can get from the VA? I sent him straight to the trust fund. We got the furnace in, paid for, and about 3 weeks later he died. But he died so grateful that it was unbelievable. It's one of those heart-rending stories that you could not even begin to make up.
Yeah, there's a lot of individuals out there who are too proud in many ways, and that's the older veterans.
Yeah.
From World War II and Korea. And they're leaving us pretty fast.
I just hope that your listeners understand that we are so focused on the veteran community that there's no length we won't go to assist them with their legitimate needs, concerns, issues, or whatever it is that's related to their service to this state and this nation.
What you do for veterans, I'm vice president of the National Marine Corps League Foundation. We do exactly the same kind, except it's limited to Marines and Marine families. So anybody out there who's dependent of a Marine or a Marine, him or herself, send me an email and it's referred to your local detachment, and we do the same. We do one-shot things, just as George says he does. We pay 1 month's rent or 1 month's utility bills or whatever.
I want to thank the Secretary for being our guest. It's kind of hard to believe we went through our 30 minutes already. And for those of you who may not know, we're wishing Ray his happy birthday for his 80th birthday. And we hope you have found this information important to you. But once again, we ask you to stop by the American Legion or the DAV and find out about the benefits and support that's available to you and your families. And once again, we wish you all the best in the new year, and we hope you have a wonderful holiday. And thank you again for watching Veterans Forum.